By the time I noticed they were following me, it was almost too late. By the time I realized why they were following me, it was definitely too late. Humans can't smell blood, at least not in any useful way, which is why I never expected the undead to be so sensitive. Maybe if I'd been above ground this last decade instead of trapped in a bunker, I would have known these basic things, but more likely I'd be dead. Or undead. My skill set was less wilderness survival and more lying through my teeth. But lying through my teeth wasn't going to help with the mindless horde closing in.
Tonight, Silence and Starsong magazine sends you on a voyage of high strangeness. From the darkness under your bed to the thrones of unknown worlds. You're listening to SNS Radio.
I had tripped and sliced my shin on a rock some ways back, not long after I caught my first glimpse of the walking dead in the wild. Something like a woman shuffling through the underbrush, clothes crumbling off a half-rotted corpse, one leg twisted in an odd angle below the knee. The thing reminded me of Maggie, the woman who had ruined my life, and the reason I was out here. They had the same wavy blonde hair, although Maggie's had shone like an angel's, while the zombie's was dull and tangled with pine branches. In retrospect, I should not have run. There was no way the zombie could have caught me with that broken leg. But I panicked, and in that panic left a trail of blood on the thorns and brambles that ripped into my skin. And that's how they ended up coming at me from all angles. After so long in the bunker, my body was weak and my feet uncertain on the rough, unfamiliar terrain of the woods. At least the zombies were also getting snagged and slowed by the foliage, but they had numbers on their side, and my stamina was quickly faltering. My chest tightened and burned from the exertion. With my asthma, I could hardly breathe in the humidity, and my vision was starting to blur from lack of oxygen. I would not make it. Then I heard it. Salvation. Zombies can't stand water, that much I knew. At the time, I didn't realize that I, too, should fear the water in this area. I couldn't afford to care either way. I could see the river through the trees, was only a few steps away, when a man with no cheeks closed in on my left. I dodged right, only to find a bony hand reaching from that side. I jerked back, stumbled, and fell, using that momentum to roll to the water's edge. As soon as I hit water, I swam as far and as fast as I could with the little energy I had remaining. I only looked back when my feet touched the smooth stones of the riverbed. Undead lined the opposing bank, swaying as dumbly as I. I needed to get out of the water fast, before I fainted and drowned. Then movement to my left. Eyes above water. A long, scaly snout. Alligator. With the water running about my chest, I could only move in slow motion, but the alligator was not so restrained. He slithered across the water and opened his jaw, his sharp teeth angled towards me. At least I would die for real. Except I didn't. The gator was mere inches from my face when someone, or something, seized me by the collar, lifted me straight out of the water, and threw me to dry land. I swear I was a good 10 feet out, yet my savior did this as though I was no heavier than a rabbit. He looked more beast than man. I am by no means a short person, but whoever saved me was at least a head taller than I and twice my width, with untamed hair and a beard that bushed down to his elbows. He was garbed all in animal skins with a wolf head for a hat, which must have been uncomfortably hot in the muggy fall weather. All I could see of the actual man were his hands, large as dinner plates and covered in hair. He carried no weapon in those hands, and did not need one. When the alligator snapped at him, he caught a jaw in either hand and pulled them apart. The reptile thrashed, but the beast man was unmoved. He continued to pull until the creature stilled. The man dropped the carcass back in the water, waded out, and walked right past me without so much as a glance my way. Wait! The man stopped, turned at my voice, and stood there like a rock while I covered my breath. Slowly my chest eased and my head cleared. Take me with you! The man said nothing and started to walk upstream. I got up and tailed after him like a lost puppy. I'll die out here alone. You saw how useless I am. Please. The man didn't say anything, but that also meant he didn't disagree. Thank you. I won't be in your hair long. I have somewhere to go. I just need to prove something first. I'm an epidemiologist, you know. I'm in charge of finding a cure. I was making good progress, I'll have you know. But then this charlatan comes wandering in, saying she already was cured. Do you believe that? She said... I stopped myself before saying, a monster man in the woods saved her. Hey, you don't happen to know a girl named Maggie? Young, blonde, prettiest girl you've ever seen?
Yes.
Wait, what? She wasn't lying?
No.
Well, I'm sure she was at least lying about being undead.
No.
Of course she was. That's simply not possible. Wait, I'm still bleeding. They'll find me. I looked around wildly for bandages, alcohol, an old rag, anything useful. Before I realized that I wouldn't find anything in the middle of the woods, the man placed a massive hand on my shoulder and shoved me down so that I sat on a boulder. He loomed over me, his bulk blocking out the sun. For a moment I thought he was going to kill me. It would have been the smart thing to do, to make sure I couldn't lead any zombies to him. Instead, he stooped down and rolled up my khaki trousers, exposing the worst of my open wounds. I recoiled at his stench, a heady blend of sweat, dirty animal skins, and smoke. That dip in the river must have been his first bath in weeks, and it had clearly not been long enough. He pulled a handmade leather satchel off his shoulder and dug out a beat-up metal bottle, from which he poured water over my leg. Once the wound was somewhat clean, he sealed it with mud from the riverbank and wrapped it in a leaf from a nearby plantain tree. He moved on to treat my other scratches and scrapes similarly, quickly, efficiently, as though he'd done this dozens of times before. I tried not to think about just how crude this medicine was, and how likely it was that I'd contract an infection. I'm John, by the way. What's your name?
Christoph.
So, Christoph, you have a cure.
Yes.
How? I mean, what? What is it? Can I see it?
No.
Why not?
Your intentions are not pure.
Pardon me? What do you think I intend?
You want to use your science magic on it.
I blinked at the man's lucky guess. Did he often encounter scientists in the middle of the woods? When he finished with my wounds, he pulled me to my feet and continued on his way. I didn't for a second believe anyone had a cure, let alone such a rustic man, but he knew something. Look, I need something to bring back to the lab, or they won't let me in. If you don't have anything, that's fine. I just need to figure out what's going on. If I can show them it's all a misunderstanding, that Maggie never was a zombie to begin with, I can have my old life back.
You do not need...
For a while I kept pushing, but it was clear I would not get more than a few words out of Christoph. So as he led me along the river and through the woods, I filled the silence with my own nervous chatter. Slowly I began to relax in his quiet, strong presence. He made no move to silence me, no indication that I was getting on his nerves, unlike my former bunker mates who would roll their eyes every time I opened my mouth. I began to tell him everything, even the truth. He was perhaps the first person I had been honest with in almost a decade. I felt a weight lift as I spoke. I told him about how I only survived the apocalypse because armed guards practically kidnapped me from my home back when the Dead Rising was only a rumor that nobody believed. How they flew me to Alabama and sealed me and other carefully selected scientists in a bunker as we searched for a cure. But there is no cure for death. Never will be. At best we're looking at prevention, some sort of vaccine, and even that we failed at. Not that I ever told the guards how hopeless our cause was, how useless it was to keep me around. I'm not suicidal, so I became adept at making it seem like I was making progress, and that saved me for years. I never once believed that she had actually been undead, but what mattered was that the guards believed it. And if they thought someone else had found a cure, I was a worthless waste of rations, which is how I found myself alone in the woods running for my life. Christoph listened calmly as I unloaded 10 years of woes on him. Periodically, he would pause to gather acorns off the ground or pick chanterelles from a decaying log and store them in his satchel before moving on. As the shadows grew long, I began to wonder if we were going anywhere in particular, or just wandering eternally. But just before dark, we came to a small clearing partially concealed in a rocky hillside. With little more than a makeshift lean-to and a petering-out fire, Christoph's camp was so sparse I found myself actually missing the bunker. But it was better than sleeping alone in the woods. He threw a log on the fire, dug out a blackened pot from the lean-to, and began to boil water for stew. He would make many such stews for us in the coming days. I stayed the night in his camp, huddled close to the fire on a pile of moss and leaves, wrapped in one of Kristoff's skins. And the next night. And the one after. I was terrified to leave the man's side, so I'd follow him as he wandered the woods, checking rabbit snares and fish traps and foraging persimmons, blackberries, and other flora. These trips were slow and arduous in the rugged terrain. My muscles ached and my feet blistered and my lungs felt like they were in an iron vise, but Kristoff never so much as broke a sweat, despite his heavy garments of skin. Even so, he would frequently pause long enough for me to sit and catch my breath. He taught me too, in his own laconic fashion. Among other things, he showed me how to purify water, identify and utilize herbs I never knew existed, and build a shelter suitable for the unpredictable weather. Each day was more depressing than the last. Was this my new life? Eating weeds in the wilderness with a half-mute beast man? I kept hoping we would run into someone, anyone at all, who might be able to direct me to human society. But days went by without so much as a trace of man, alive or undead. This seemed strange to me, but I did not think to ask about it until it was too late. And one day I did see something. A flash of dark hair, a girl stumbling our way. I was euphoric. Finally, someone who might say something. I raised a hand to wave and opened my mouth to call her over when I realized my error. One of her arms ended at the elbow, and her left ear was missing entirely. She was not alive, and Kristoff was walking right towards her. "What are you doing?" Kristoff paid me no heed and continued forwards. The zombie girl snapped her head in his direction. If she hadn't noticed us before, she did now. She hobbled through grasping brambles as fast as her threadbare legs would carry her, moss slack and wide, ravenous for flesh. "Look, I know you've got this superhuman strength thing going on, but this isn't an alligator. This is a zombie. She will turn you if she so much as scratches you. Get back!" But Kristoff made no move to escape. Instead, he calmly opened his satchel, pulled out a tin, and twisted open the lid as the zombie closed the distance between them. The girl reached her hand towards Kristoff, and I was just about to turn heel and run when Kristoff did something so strange. I couldn't help but keep watching. He pulled out what looked like a crumb of bread from the tin and offered it to the zombie. She stopped. I couldn't believe it. The zombie actually stopped. Her dead head and dull eyes angling towards the bread in a shadow of curiosity, her hand pausing midair just inches from Kristoff's face. In a flash, Kristoff seized her by the wrist, placed the crumb into her hand, and let go. She sucked the crumb off her hand in a way that almost looked human. I can't explain what happened next. I can only tell you what I remember seeing. You tell me if sight or memory can be trusted. From the span of a few breaths, the zombie girl became not a zombie girl. Her ear reformed. Her half arm became a full arm. Her skin turned from ash to amber. Her chestnut eyes cleared, and her dark hair became sleek and glossy. Every single thing about her became not just alive, but radiant. As her mind returned, so did her modesty. She blushed and bent over herself to hide the soft skin that her rotten rags left bare. Kristoff took off a fur mantle and handed it to her to wrap herself in.
"Thank you."
The girl trembled as she spoke and was soon weeping. What must it be like, to be dead and then alive? A monster and then a human? For once in my life, I had no words. That's not bread, is it? It's the cure. Kristoff sat on the other side of the fire long after the girl, the woman, the angel in rags had gone her own way. With the sun down, the wild animals out, and the dead walking, I was fairly certain she was already dead for good by now. But Kristoff seemed to think otherwise. Not for the first time. I wondered if he knew something I didn't.
It is bread and the cure.
What's that supposed to mean?
It's mystery.
Can I see it?
No,
Why not?
your intent is not pure.
My intent is to cure people. You have the cure, and you hide it. That's the opposite of pure. I found myself on my feet as I spoke, my arms flailing furiously as I looked down on the beast man in indignation. Then Kristoff rose. He towered over me, his eyes burning like coals, and I promptly sat back down. Once I had calmed, he crouched down and prodded the fire with a stick as though nothing had happened. My rage had vanished, but my mind raced. I could already think of a dozen tests to run the cure through to try and find out what it was and how to replicate it. They would let me back in the lab now. They had to. I was so absorbed in my thoughts, I jumped when Kristoff finally spoke again.
It is not of your science. It is sacred. A holy man sacrificed himself to give me this.
I resisted the urge to roll my eyes at Kristoff's superstition, but didn't bother arguing anymore. I knew a lost cause when I saw one. It seemed I would have to take matters into my own hands. Kristoff always slept next to his satchel, so I had to creep right up to the slumbering beast to find what I needed. What humanity needed. I felt a pang of guilt as he slept peacefully, one massive hand resting on his satchel. I wished I could say goodbye and thank him for all he had done. But I had given him the opportunity to do the right thing, and he had refused it. I saw no other option. I intended to take just a sample of the cure, but as soon as I started sliding the satchel out from under Kristoff's hand, he jerked in his sleep. I panicked and snatched the entire pack before dashing away. It was dark, but the moon was bright. By then I knew the lay of the land well enough to find my way to the riverbank, and follow that to a crumbling but sturdy enough roadway bridge upstream. If I could get to the other side, I was moderately confident I could find the bunker, or at least draw enough attention to myself that the guards could find me. I crossed the bridge without incident, was starting to think I would make it when I whipped around to see a green-skinned, slack-jawed man with no legs crawling out from under the bridge, only feet away. I backed away only to find another had crept behind me from the bushes. Its half-rotted hands grasped at my arm before I yanked away. I turned to run, but my shoulder was tugged down roughly by the leather strap. The first zombie had reached me and was clutching the satchel with both hands, trying to drag it and me to the ground. Without thinking, I ducked out of the strap and left the zombie to the satchel. Only when I was out of breath and far from the bridge with no undead in sight did I slow down and realize what I had done. That I'd given up my one chance at my life back. Only then did I notice a thin scratch on my shoulder. How can I describe death? As a man of science, I always thought death would be nothingness, a dreamless, wakeless sleep. I know better now. Death is not ceasing to be, but ceasing to be human. The hunger came first, inexplicable, insatiable, the need to consume. I felt nothing else, was nothing else, and eventually could see nothing else. The sun must have risen, but I did not recognize it. Or perhaps I knew it, but simply did not care. The sun was not food, and therefore an irrelevant datum, as was everything else my senses absorbed. Everything except the scent, like nothing I smelled as a living man. It smelled like ecstasy, or rather the promise of it, drawing me in more powerfully than the arms of a beautiful woman. Shapes passed me by. The scent grew stronger. My body must have been moving on its own accord. Then I saw it. A shape that almost had meaning. Something hairy and massive. A face. The face was moving, but I cannot tell you what it said, for words were as irrelevant as the sun. I did not want words. All I wanted was to taste what lay behind that face. One word almost sounded familiar. My name. I'm sure of it now, looking back. Kristoff was calling my name. He had come for me. He could have outrun me easily, or overpowered me, but he did not. Instead, he stood there, arms wide, inviting. As I took from him the thing that I most craved. I woke up, if that is the right term, in the middle of the woods, my hands crammed to my face, bread crumbling into it and out of my mouth. I was kneeling on the forest floor before a partially eaten loaf, fragrant and still steaming. It and my hands were stained red. I threw the bread to the ground and shot to my feet. Flashes returned to me. The scent of blood, the frenzied craving, Christoph's gentle face, his arms open wide, my teeth in his flesh. I bent over and retched, but nothing came out. I took deep breaths to keep from hyperventilating, which is when I noticed that my chest wasn't tight. In fact, my lungs were clearer than ever, even though my asthma should be acting up. When I assessed for injuries, I found I had none. In fact, my skin was clear and smooth, smoother than I ever remembered it. The scars on my legs from that first zombie attack had vanished, along with the blisters on my feet. My muscles no longer ached, but felt strong, like I could run all morning and not slow. But I could not fully embrace joy. Christoph's body was nowhere to be seen. Only his animal skins remained, lying in a pile beside the bread. I knelt beside them, picked up the wolf head, and wept. My head jerked at a snapping twig. A man dark and middle-aged, with eyes dead as stone, was shambling my way. I got to my feet and prepared to run, but then I realized that those dead eyes were not looking at me. Rather, they were fixated on the bread at my feet. Without taking my eyes off the zombie, I stooped down and broke off a piece and tossed it his way. He picked it up from the ground in a handful of dirt and shoved it in his mouth, dirt and all. Bit by bit, just like the woman in the woods, the man transformed before my eyes. He would want answers, I was sure, some guidance on what to do next, but I had none to offer. Bread would have to be enough.
We hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube. Be sure to check out our website. Follow us on Twitter. If you like this production, we're sure you'll enjoy the strange tales and high adventure of S&S Magazine, available on Amazon. Script by Holly Maley, John by Carson Spratt, Zombie Girl by Holly Maley, Christoph by David Kohlhoff.